and welcome to another edition of Backfire. Today we have some special guests, Adam Lowe, and we've got Nicholas Lilios with us.
We just have his head.
Yeah, and good morning, Franklin.
Good morning.
John's out of town today, or something's going on, so
I know. I mean, really in high cotton
it takes
today.
at least two people to fill his shoes, right?
That's his story. Yeah.
Oh, well, Nicholas, welcome to the show. Nicholas, he's the chairman of the Bradley County School Board.
Well, good morning, Steve.
Good morning to you. I guess first thing we'll talk about is Dr. Linda Cash.
Yes, sir. Our
was
new director of schools.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about her.
Well, she comes to us from Robertson County. She's been the assistant director of schools there for the last couple years. Prior to that, she's held a few different positions, one in a university, and she's been principal and a teacher. She's worked her way up through the educational system, about 26 years experience. She was our one candidate that we interviewed last night. We originally had two scheduled. We had one pull out over the weekend.
That was Bill Heath?
Yes, Dr. Bill Heath from Lawrence County. And we continued with the meeting as planned, had our interviews. We had 5 of the board members ready to vote yes. 2 were voting no at the time that we were voting for the contract, perhaps a little concerned that they wanted to see another candidate be interviewed. But with 5 of us on board, that's all it took. And we have her starting June 1st. She accepted the contract as written, which was very much appreciated by the board members that had prepared this contract.
What was different about the contract?
Well, there was quite a few things different. One thing that a lot of folks were talking about was we put in a lot of safety mechanisms for the board and for our school system because we felt like the last contract was too one-sided towards the director. So a lot of things built in for the board's flexibility. One such thing was called, I guess we're calling it the demotion clause, where if things weren't going well, we could reappoint the director to another position in the school systems and hire a new director. That was something that we felt was needed for the protection should things not go as well as we wanted. We didn't want to just necessarily have to terminate a director, but perhaps reposition them in the school system. We
make a school teacher out of them instead of a superintendent?
There's a lot of different positions, directors of different systems within the central office. There's different principal positions, so there'd be a lot of options within our school system. We have almost 1,000 employees, so there's a lot of possibilities there. But also we brought the benefits in line with every other employee. It had been that the previous director had very special treatment in terms of benefits where the entire family was covered. They had a car allowance. They had special retirement benefits. We took everything, we stripped all that out, and we said our director will be no different than any other employee within the school system. Same benefits in terms of health and life insurance and retirement, no car allowance. We did up the base pay, and the total package, however, is we're actually paying a little bit less if you looked at the entire package deal. So we feel like we're doing better even economically in terms of the contract. We went with the 3-year instead of the 4-year, so a little bit shorter term. Now the board can at any point up those years along the way. So if after a year we're very happy with her performance, we can add years onto that contract. But we thought 3 years, we felt a little safer in case something wasn't working out. We weren't trapped into a longer-term contract.
Were there some measurables or something that went into this contract?
Yes, this was one of the first contracts, probably in either school system, especially in ours, that had a strategic plan as a requirement of the contract. We required that the director produce a strategic plan for the school system and that their goals reflect the strategic plan, and that the evaluation of the director be an evaluation of their performance against those goals and the strategic plan. So that was a component of this contract.
I want to go on to say I've got something printed off this morning, and it said that County Commissioner Dan Ross praised her selection, saying he believes she will make an excellent school director for the county. He added she has expressed a desire to work with the commission. Well, working with the commission is really not her job, is it?
Well, it's it's all of our jobs. We're partners
It's a
with
full-time job.
we're partners with the county commission.
Good answer, Nick.
It's easy to say they're our funding body, but they also are our supporters. They're our community supporters. Each one of us in each district has 2 county commissioners that support our endeavors, and their kids are in our school system, their grandkids are, so they have a vested interest. So I believe it's very important that the director of schools have a good line of communication with county commissioners.
You know, some of the concerns I've heard some of our citizens here talk about was that the school budgets are so high, but there's no one, the superintendent or whatever, they're more geared to be a doctor or a professor or something more so in education than they are managing people and managing a budget that size. Was that considered when selecting someone?
I'm not sure I entirely follow your question.
In other words, somebody understands how to run a business rather than having a doctorate degree and being an ex-school teacher.
Well, it is a tricky position that it requires both because there is an element of big business within schools. You have big contracts with your service providers, your vendors, your architectural firms, your building and maintenance, human resources, which is something we're wanting to concentrate on. But at the same time, if you don't understand where all your employees are coming from, if you don't have that educational background, if you haven't been in the classroom, been a principal, it's hard to be effective at that position. I'd say there's a lot of successful companies out there that the CEO was once the store clerk in one of their shops. I think that's been a philosophy of a lot of the major U.S. companies. Walmart has a lot of upper-level managers that once worked a register or stocked shelves. So I believe that's the same thing for a director of schools. You need to have that grounded experience in the classroom, but then you're going to need the upper-level business experience to know how to run a corporation. And I think that's also the help of the board. The board's there to help, support, and advise the director. And if you have a diverse group of board members that have experience in those different areas, that's a big plus for the director.
The truth is, Steve, the educational community has been largely resistant to financially minded people over the years. They've gravitated to leadership that it's kind of like politics. Those who I relate to is those who I want in charge. So oftentimes they say, well, it's important to have for them to be a teacher in the classroom. And I know the school system did their survey and took what do you want to see in a director of schools, and that wasn't as dominant as some might have thought it would have been, this previous classroom experience. I find it interesting that no one says a director of schools should have been a parent. No one says that. No one says you should have had to raise a child in your house. No one says those things because those get a little too personal, and perhaps we're making judgments about lifestyle. But it's easy for us to say professionally we want you to have been in the classroom, but in large, both locally, state-wise, and across the nation, candidates who have some financial prowess about them or some sense or maybe even have a little bit of both are largely at a disadvantage when they sit down with a panel of individuals who have nothing but teaching experience, who fail to have an appreciation for financial wherewithal and people management and those organizational aspects that when you leave education and you go to the world of nonprofits, people tend to value tremendously. And the difference typically tends to be that the board of directors in those nonprofits are made up of community individuals who aren't overtly political but are often business people in that community.
Well, fundamentally, the question is the director of schools a manager or a policymaker?
What was the hard decisions that you looked at when you were picking the superintendent of schools? I mean, what was some of the strong things that you were trying to find?
I mean, me in particular, I was looking for experience in leadership roles. I was looking for someone on the rise. In other words, someone who was having an upward career path that was aggressive in what they were doing, willing to take risks. I was not looking for someone who had been comfortable in a position for a long period of time. Those are some personality traits I was looking for. more so than anything else. Having particular experience, I did talk to various people that were interested within our own school system, residents of Bradley County, and though they may have been capable of doing the job, I think on an earlier program when I'd called in at one point, I said that something I was looking for was somebody that may be coming from the outside that could provide a new perspective. Because if all you've ever done is stayed within one school system, that's all you ever know. You don't know what to compare it to. So it was, I thought, important to have someone who would come from the outside, who has had experience in other systems, that could then come to ours and compare their successes in their previous systems with what we were doing.
Well, not to mention, in this, anybody who's has a child in the system or is anywhere close to the system knows a lot of the internal candidates were already brokering relationships with. If I get in this position, one of the convenient factors of bringing someone in from the outside is everybody in the system kind of gets a fair shake from day one. There are no preconceived notions, no pre-existing relationships, no, well, I owe you from way back when. And there were candidates or people who had expressed interest who overtly, to me and to other individuals in the community, had already started trying to broker things into place once they if they took the reins. So it's kind of nice to see that someone's stepping into that position fresh and can judge things on their merits rather than all of that other stuff.
Has the school board communicated to the new director what it sees as the priorities for the upcoming year?
No, individually, when each board member has talked one-on-one with Dr. Cash, and we had with some of the other folks, and I believe at that time, at least for me personally, I expressed some of my desires of where we might head, where we might go student achievement-wise, improvements of scores, improvements of the budgeting process. Now we will begin as of June 1st with the earnest effort of the board as a whole expressing where it wants to go as we produce our strategic direction. As part of the contract, we have that at the end of the month of July, we will have produced a strategic direction that will have goals for our new director, and that's going to be a collaborative effort between the board and the director of schools.
My question, how long was Dr. Cash with Robertson County Schools as the director of the school?
2013 is when she began that position.
So that was a short position. Before that, she came as, she was a dean, formerly a principal of an elementary school in Gallatin, and also was with the assistant dean, graduate of education at Union University.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. What about, I'm going to go back to the money skills again. What made you think, what decisions were made that she could be a good manager of all these different departments and some of this? You think the time she had in Robertson County Schools, was it a larger system or a smaller system?
It's a larger system than what we have here, and part of her role there, she was taking on a lot of the tasks that a director would have. Actually, probably the equivalent workload of what we have here, even though in a bigger system you start dividing up more tasks with your assistant director. So she was handling the monitoring of the budget there, a monthly monitoring process that they were involved with. She was handling personnel and working. They do have a human resource department there and was working with that. So she had been given the lead on several areas that were important to us.
Bill Heath that pulled out, did he give a reason he was not doing it? Had he taken another position?
No, he hadn't taken another position. He in a message to me, he said that it was something that he had been considering for a long time during this process, not just the weekend that he left the message for me, but had made the final decision to withdraw. He didn't name any one reason. He said he had lots of conversations and one-on-ones with different board members, even leading up to the week before the interviews, and just expressed that he felt this time it wasn't the right decision for him. I mean, there can be, though he didn't name one reason, there could be lots of things. I mean, he did have a child that was in their last year high school at the school that he's the superintendent of. So
that would make a big. That
could. And Dr. Cash had expressed the same thing. She has a child that she wanted to bring with her that's in high school, going to be a sophomore, and she had said her child would like to have at least 3 solid years in a school and not be moved one more time. So one of the things when we were negotiating our contract, she wanted at least 3 years so she knew her kid could finish a high school.
Was you trying to give her less than 3 years? Were y'all
a
trying
90-day probation?
No, we had anything was open. We just didn't want to go to 4 years. So yes, there had been discussions about whether it should be 2 years or even do you do a 1-year probationary year? And so all those are negotiating terms, and she was willing to accept some of our other terms. So 3 years was.
Professional question on Dr. Cash. Obviously, I read the resume. One of the curiosities that those of us in higher ed often have when we look at people who are controlling the school, what did she actually do her doctoral research on? What's her area of expertise?
Then I'd have to reference a resume, which I didn't bring with me.
I'd be curious to see. That's usually very revealing to someone and what they value and what they're versed in when it comes to education.
Well, I guess at this time, Martin Ringsap, I've got to be good friends with him at the Cleveland City System, and I just hope that this doctor's as good as he is, and that welcome them to Cleveland and bring her over and introduce us to her sometime on WOOP.
Okay, and I'd be remiss if I didn't highlight to everyone listening today that in the 100 years of Bradley County schools, there's never been a female director of schools. There's never been one in the city school system either. And if you think about people's perception of East Tennessee and conservatism and maybe roots in the backwoods, I believe this shows we are a progressive county. There are no glass ceilings within the Bradley County school system.
Your central office is predominantly female now.
I remember as a kid in school, all your teachers were ladies and the principals were men. And I'm glad to see that has turned on its head, and that's no longer an issue, whether you're a man or woman, of how far you can go within the school system, at least in Bradley County.
Well, thanks for coming in, and we want you here for the rest of this show to talk about all the other issues too.
Sure.
We had to lean on that a little bit this morning, but I wanted to thank you for coming in and talking about that.
My pleasure.
And please bring back your new superintendent of school sometimes.
Okay.
We'll introduce her to the WOOP fans we have. Anyway, Franklin, what's going on in your world today?
In my world?
Yeah.
Well, I'm just bathing in all the warmth in the room here with John not being here.
It's going to be a lot
John's
quieter.
very warm. Hot even.
Today's like a day off for Franklin, isn't it?
I'm just, you guys just go ahead and talk. I'll just listen.
Franklin gets the day off today. Robert Lee Goins, recipient of the Veteran Service Award. That's Bullet who calls in here in the mornings a lot. Hats off, everyone. He's done a wonderful job. He was given the Veteran Service Award during the holiday the other day, and he keeps the graves clean up here and the shrubbery removed, no flags, and sets the headstones, and he's been very involved with the veterans in the graveyard up there. So again, give him a big round of applause and that a boy whenever you see him. That a boy, Bullet. That a boy.
Totally deserving.
He is totally deserving. Good job. Good job. Good job. The truck the logging truck that was involved in an accident out here and killed the 17-year-old girl. Commissioner Tom Cry said that they needed to lower the speed limit out there in that area. I want to say that could be one of the things that goes along with it, but I tell you something that I know for a fact is those old trucks that they use to pull those logs are wore-out old trucks that are not being used on highways anymore, and they need to have safety inspections. And if TDOT would get out there and set up a safety inspection deal, you watch them, they wouldn't travel North Lee Highway again. They'd be coming from another direction if they'd get out there and start doing it on a regular basis.
Well,
that's like blaming the gun in the crime. We had a 20-year-old non-licensed driver
who ran a red light.
I wouldn't be looking at
one thing.
at the truck or the speed limit at that point.
Well, those two things are different issues. Mm-hmm. Both deserve attention in my view, because I think there is an issue about I'm not picking on anybody, many of the logging truck operations are, for lack of a better word, very small businesses.
That's right.
And it is true that a lot of the equipment is very old, has been kept on the road for a long time, and there probably are some legitimate issues about that. There have been a lot of accidents over the years involving these logging trucks, even on that highway.
Well,
it's not
at
the
some
first
point we
one,
have to ask ourselves
but
if that
it's a different
highway is the appropriate channel for those logging trucks. And I know that there's a campaign right now that's asking that very question. And I think it's an appropriate one because we have seen a number of these incidences over the past several years. I think when we start looking at regulation, Franklin hits the nail on the head. A lot of these are very, very small businesses, and it's a very fragile economic environment for those individuals. But and we're always battling this: what's economically viable versus public safety, what's really a problem, what's not a problem. But once again, in this particular instance, running a red light at any speed is going to cause a problem.
Sure.
And not being CDL certified to drive a truck is going to be a problem. So I think we have to look at it from a global perspective, not just really honing in on the industry itself.
Well, I can I can assure you, if there was a few safety checks set up out there on the highway from TDOT, you'd see those trucks disappear.
There are
a lot of them.
There are some
If
standards
they don't, they would pass a safety
that are
inspection.
supposed to apply. But I think, you're going to Bowaters back and forth, or that area there. I think it's a reasonable question, as you talked about speed on that road, whether it's appropriate to have
Guarantee he didn't have the
truck
brakes to
speed
stop
limit.
that truck quick enough.
You can have a separate speed limit for trucks sometimes.
That's right.
That's a possibility.
I mean, the boy was absolutely wrong the way he was driving the truck, but
Sure, but
a truck won't stop just because you want it to.
Well,
you have to plan.
Even if you can stop a truck on a dime, you don't necessarily want to when it's loaded with logs.
Well,
that's not a good idea.
You need to drive the truck so you can stop it.
Yeah.
You don't need to be running 55
there's
or
no
60
question here.
towards a red light, and then all of a sudden it starts changing and you can't stop.
Well, and once again, is that road built to do what it's obviously to being used for?
If not that road, then what? I mean, I wouldn't want that logging truck on I-75. And
and that's
no
what's being
other
proposed
options.
right now. Is there a better option taking it to the interstate? And you're right. The alternatives, what you're always evaluating against, is another plan any better? And it may be that the solution is that road needs some addressing, whether it's speed limit or widening. There are areas where there's no shoulder, where it narrows off really quickly.
Well, the amount of traffic on that road has increased exponentially with the opening of Walker Valley High School up there. There's a tremendous amount, twice a day. There's a lot of traffic
Which
up
is,
there.
I think, most people's concern when they think about traffic on that road is the fact that you have a high school with teen drivers coming back and through that corridor. And those of us who ride motorcycles will tell you we never drive, very rarely ride Lee Highway because you get wood chips in your face, and there's always, whether it's debris or the trucks themselves, and even the corners to be made a lot of times coming off. If you'll ever go right there in front of McDonald's, every now and then you'll see the wheel ruts to where I think it's improved over the years, but it's still not a great turn for a lot of individuals. And a lot of those logging trucks, they're coming from the corridor out 64, they're turning off on APD 40, they're running up 25th Street, and they're turning on a Coe right there, where it has already been labeled one of the most dangerous intersections that Cleveland's tried to address, and we're sending that traffic through that intersection.
One of Cleveland's transportation deficiencies is the lack of another north-south route that runs through the county there. Ocoee Street, North Lee Highway, that sort of thing, when originally conceived, was not nearly as high a traffic area as it is now. So we essentially have Michigan Avenue Road, North Lee Highway, and I-75. Those are the ways to get anywhere north and south on that, and it's a growth issue that we have to address.
Well, anyway, I still think safety inspections would help more than anything at this point in time. TDOT would get involved in those. Move along.
Well, let me just say I'm always tingly whenever you guys suggest regulation of any kind.
Well, I
didn't say regulations. I said safety inspections.
I don't presume
but
to
you're
have
inspecting. What are they inspecting for? Some minimum requirement.
Brakes more than anything.
There's a regulation.
I'm telling you, those old trucks right there, their brakes are not working right on 90% of them.
I don't presume to have a good answer to this. What I said was I would be very cautious with regulation because of the fragility of
Making
the small
sure they're
business.
licensed drivers.
Actually, you brought that up, Franklin. You actually mentioned the small businesses are very small, and I don't necessarily trust TDOT with much anything. More or less trying to get them to get a body over there. If they'll just complete the work that they have at hand, that'd be nice.
Joe V's back in the scene again with the graveyard up on the hill. It's overgrown, and now it's an argument.
Bullet was taking. Oh, that's a different graveyard.
That's a different. Anyway,
maybe they need to hire Bullet.
Now then, they're saying that the maintenance has a sign up there that is being maintained by the Bradley County Highway Department. But there's a sign up there that says that, but evidently nobody's doing it because the weeds are up a couple of feet high or something now. So anyway, they're going to look into it and take the sign down if the county's not supposed to maintain it.
Well, is the county supposed to maintain it?
I don't know. You tell me.
I think Jeff Yarber's on that Fort Hill Cemetery.
There's
board.
a portion.
There's a section.
Well, Jeff's the one raising Cain.
There's a section of Fort Hill Cemetery that is owned by the county or maintained by it, and the rest of it is privately owned.
It's the very old section that the county has, isn't it? Towards the north
a portion
end.
of it.
Mayor Davis says that an agreement for the county to maintain the site apparently goes way back if there's an agreement to maintain the site. Basically, they're saying take the sign down if the county's not going to maintain it. So
I'm sure that's the problem. Is the sign?
The sign is what
I'm
it
sure
is.
people want the sign down, not the grass cut. Right?
Yes. Also, Waterville Golf Course out there, they say it's grown up almost waist high now.
See, I'm thinking, okay, if somebody wasn't doing their job, I would want to keep the sign showing who's neglecting their job. Wouldn't you?
We'll have to figure that out. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson. We'll be right back after this.
You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. WOOP FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
Check into cash. The cash you need is closer than you think.
Get an auto title loan today for up to $2,500 at Check Into Cash.
You drive home with the cash in your pocket.
Visit Check Into Cash for an auto title loan today, or get a payday advance for up to $425. Call toll-free 877-262-CASH. Title loan amount determined by value of car and ability to repay. Borrowers often use payday advances over a period of months, which can be expensive. Restrictions apply. See store for details.
Did you know that U.S. Money Shops cashes all checks, even the ones most check cashers reject? Tax refund checks, government checks, payroll checks, and many more. And when you cash a check with U.S. Money Shops, we'll give you 10% off your next purchase. At U.S. Money Shops, we have everything you need at a fraction of regular retail. So stop by one of our 11 locations or visit us online at usmoneyshops.com.
Buy or sell or apply today, the better way at U.S. Money Shops.
Some restrictions may apply. See store for details.
If you need a little green, Lending Frog is making deals. He'll lend you cash on any kind of wheels. Borrow just a little, or you can borrow big. Lending Frog is a new financial gig. It's hip to hop into cash. LendingFrog.com is making a splash. Dig it, dig it. Dig it, dig it.
Hello, my name is Andy Figglestaller with Ed Jacobs & Associates. We are an employee benefit and insurance broker in business for the past 20 years. The new healthcare law, also known as Obamacare, has finally arrived. The law is complex and the choices are confusing. You have questions, we have the answers. It is our passion to find cost-effective solutions for every client. The solutions will be different for every person or business. Let our knowledge, experience, and passion go to work for you. Contact us today and let us assist you through this process. Our phone number is 423-473-0202, or you can find us on the web at edjacobs.com.
Every morning, the sun greets you. as reliable as a Trane heating and cooling system. Well, almost. Because no matter the temperature outside, it's always perfect inside. And when the sun calls it a day, a Trane system is there to say goodnight. Heating, cooling, and beyond.
Need to perfect the temperature in your home? Call the Trane Comfort Specialist at Mechanical Systems, 336-5739. High quality service and installation for more than 30 years.
It's hard to stop a Trane.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson on Whoop FM. Call 423-614-5553 to join in on the conversation. Now, back to Backfire.
And we are back with Adam Lowe and Franklin Chansey and Nicholas Lilios. Nicholas, you had a correction you wanted to
I just
address.
had a text sent to me, informed me that actually about 50 years ago there was a lady, Grace Carroll, who was director of schools. So somebody has, while we've been on the air, done a little research and sent me that correction. Now I'm only going off a text. So
Nick, if you haven't discovered by now that there are people out there fact checking your every move.
Let's take a call.
Whoop Nation responds.
Let's take a call. Go ahead, caller. You're live.
Good morning, Steve, Franklin, and Adam.
All right, now we got our headsets on. Go ahead.
Good morning.
Good morning, Bullet. Congratulations.
Y'all, I appreciate that. I'm kind of hoarse from that speech I had to make.
Oh, well, you didn't speak that much.
I heard it was moving.
I just got a head cold. Just talking about the Louisville Land Company supposed to take care of that other side over there.
Yeah.
I mean, people have been asking me about that for years, and I keep telling them. I think I may be wrong about this, but I think if he charges people to be buried there, and from what I told, he's supposed to keep it up himself. That's what I.
You talking about Joe V, Mr. Joe V. Williams?
Yeah, he charged. Anytime you charge people to be buried, you're supposed to keep it up.
Uh-huh. Why do you think they put a sign up there about the county?
Well, he just doesn't have to keep them doing it, I guess.
You think he put the sign up?
I don't know if he put the sign up or not, but I didn't know there's a sign up there. And but anyway, I've been told for years that if he charges for people to be buried there, that he's supposed to maintain it.
Well, I think the problem is they can't find any records where he was paid or something. I don't know. There's been an ongoing case about that.
Anyway, guys, I appreciate you talking about me this morning, and that was something unexpected to me, and I'm the first one, and that's one that I think besides who I was named after.
Well, Bullet, I'm proud of you. Thank you for the hard work you do.
I appreciate you guys.
See you, buddy. All right, that's our Bullet, the man that received the awards.
The man, the myth, the legend.
That's right. We were going to talk about, I want to bring up this Cleveland Councilman Banks critical of the city manager, Castile, but several council members come to her defense. Evidently, there's some ruckus going on with the city council now, wanting to change the way the management and the council is set up. I didn't understand everything about it, but anyway, Ben Moore got up and made a little speech and said he was afraid that crime from Chattanooga spilling over into Cleveland, and was afraid of a major incident will occur and give the city a black eye. So I don't know that. I think they were bragging about the way our city councilman handles the budget and so forth, but that maybe the city's growing so fast they might need to change the way it's done. So opinions?
Well, the city manager is like the director of schools. There is a contract that applies. It's a hired position. And so they're subject to being evaluated, and they serve at the will of the city council. So there's always a impetus with a city manager and a council to try and maintain good relationships with each other. If something's amiss, there's ways to resolve that. I would assume that Councilman Banks' concerns have to do with personnel issues more than budgetary type issues.
Although, there has been several budget criticisms leveled over the years, and ultimately the council's responsible for the approval of that budget, but when it comes to the day-to-day operations, the city manager has a lot of discretionary power in what happens, not only with who's hired, how they're hired, what they're paid, but how money's expended, projects here or there. I think things at the city have been more volatile since the personnel things have emerged, and there's been a lot of criticism leveled there. But the sooner directors of schools and city managers realize that they are a political appointment, that they're a part of the political process, the better. And some are more savvy to that than others. I think Janice has been one that has been more accommodating.
Let's take a call. Go ahead, caller. Oop, they hung up on us.
The ringtone there.
All right. Okay.
Well, there's a question of accountability of your staff that you hire, and unfortunately, I think our own populace, our community, doesn't like when elected officials begin questioning our hired administration. I think it's a healthy thing to do, to question your administration, the people you've hired, and have them answer for their actions. And unfortunately, folks don't like to hear that sometimes. They like to pull the little muffins over their ears and not hear what that there could be trouble or there could be questions. They like to have the rose-colored glasses and just keep moving on with rubber stamps. So
well, it's a two-edged sword. People say they don't want elected officials micromanaging, but then if you don't do that and you just do what you're supposed to do, which is critique, then you're just a critic. So there's really a no-win. And having sat on the county commission, my job was to ask questions. Obviously not leading questions a lot of times, but questions for understanding, for depth. People took offense to the questioning far more than they did to anything that came from the questioning. You constantly were in an adverse relationship with appointed officials because they didn't like to be questioned. But as the governing body, that's your job. Your job was to question them, to have a better understanding. Now, 90% of the questioning that I undertook resulted in an answer I was pleased with, that I could communicate back to constituents. But evidently there are other people who feel that the answers they're getting don't quite fit that mold.
Yeah, they probably thought you were picking on them and you're the bully for asking them questions, hard questions.
I think what you see there also is the tension that goes along with a community that likes to think of itself as smaller and friendlier, but is really dealing with large budgets now and some complex issues, and it's sort of a growth pain.
And spilling crime, as Ben Moore brings up.
It's a growth pain that we now get so personal sometimes in the interactions between elected officials and hired officials who are part of the government.
Well, I know when we had a police chief named Lee Reese, and I thought he was doing a pretty good job, and then all of a sudden all the policemen started raising Cain, and the city manager was getting complaints right and left, and basically the argument was he wasn't one of them.
Well, that's pervasive in a lot of sectors of government. Once again, we just had that conversation about a director of schools. If they've never taught in the classroom, they're not one of us. They're not a teacher. There's a sentiment that people want leadership that they identify with. And sometimes that's their occupational history. Other times it's just someone they relate to.
Well, anyway, we've had a shakeup in the city with the police department. It's been a major shakeup. I mean, it's an embarrassment more than a shakeup. It's just of what's happened. So, it does give us a black eye. And there was a consultant brought in to try to clean up or try to work with the police department and get that straightened out. Evidently, they have some problems there. They've tried to promote within. Looks like two or three times now. That has not worked. So I don't know where it's going to go from here. But anyway.
Well, I think that at least what I hope comes out of this is that we move beyond the mindset, and I'll commend Nick for the way he's approached this. There's nothing wrong with looking within, but you can't just look within to the exclusion of better alternatives that are available sometimes. And sometimes you do need outside looks at organizations and how they function. And, for me, I look at the city police department. I think that's an example where you really could use some objective outside individual who doesn't have those kinds of ties and connections build up over the years.
I think you always, it's important in leadership to always look within first, because you run the risk of taking your brightest, most talented, most capable people and running them off. You take people who really have emerged and you incubate them. We've had that argument, and the firemen are making that argument about firemen, that Bradley County incubates, and then when it gets to a certain level of professionalism, they go off to places who can appreciate them for their talents. And arguably in Bradley County's history, there's been some of that. There's been some of that where we haven't embraced those who could best serve our community from inside. But Franklin hits kind of the nail on the head. Do you want to be handcuffed by having to go local? And if there's a place where you're looking to hire something, and I got donged, but but there's a point where you have to say the internal candidates just aren't going to do it.
We like yelling and screaming, so hurry up.
I didn't bring a screaming voice this morning. You haven't hit anything controversial enough, I suppose.
Anyway, there's something that caught my attention here. Just it's a brief headline. Probably no one's read yet, but a worker in Bangladesh that worked in the Coca-Cola unit is accused of being an ISIS link.
Well, I saw that the FBI used...
Now think about that.
You had to dig deep for that story.
Yeah, I'll say.
I mean, I'm just telling you, it's just now coming out. But I mean, just think about
that would be of great concern if you're drinking Coke in Bangladesh.
Well,
we don't locally. Come from Bangladesh.
Yeah, we bottle locally.
I sure hope not.
Hey, but Steve, just this week, the FBI arrested a young man from Texas. His family was able to get him to come back to the States. They arrested this young man who went over to train and be a part of ISIS. So there are U.S. citizens who are interested.
That's a much greater concern.
Yeah, much greater concern. And the FBI actually was able to convince this kid's family to be a part of the process of getting him back to the States. Now, the big question right now is, in exchange for their help, does he get some level of leniency that the family may want to see, and is that going to continue to be the pattern? But there are definitely threats pertaining to ISIS, and there are homegrown people who are gravitating to that cause.
Right. I want to know what you think about policing in these large communities. What's going on there in the poor communities and with the policing? You know, in Baltimore right now, they're having a problem. The policemen are basically pulling their shifts and going home.
Well, they set a record for violent activity over Memorial Day weekend in Baltimore and Chicago.
Yeah.
A record
so
in
now,
both cities.
Now that mayor that stirred all this stuff up wouldn't do anything. Now she really doesn't know what to do. What's your opinion?
About Baltimore in particular, or in general? What are we talking about?
About the police departments having to put on the velvet handcuffs and not be able to go in.
I don't think they have to put on the velvet handcuffs to look at just data and see that there are issues that need to be addressed.
Like what?
Well,
like people shooting you, drive-by shootings.
Look, they pulled those numbers from Baltimore for over a 3 or 4 year period, and what did you find?
What? Tell me what you found.
Almost 65% of the people who were arrested by the police department on a whole host of these charges, when it got to court and a prosecutor looked at it, said, there's no case here, and had to dismiss it. Well, those were people who were arrested. They had to pay bonds. They may, in many cases, not every time, but many cases, they may have had a job.
Or seizures.
Sure. And so you look at something like that, and you don't have to be a genius to say this is a problem when it's happening this often. Nobody thinks if somebody's committed a violent act that they shouldn't be prosecuted and held accountable for that. But when you have citizens that are being, frankly, just harassed in many cases.
Well, let me ask you something, Franklin.
Something's got to happen.
Let's take the Ferguson issue.
Okay.
What happened there with that investigation?
Same kind of issue.
No. Let's talk about the Ferguson issue with the shooting.
You're talking about the particular incident.
That's right.
Okay.
What happened there?
It was determined there was insufficient evidence to determine the crime had committed.
We had the president send in a workforce, and then they come up with some of this stuff later that's saying this. But you know, the Ferguson policeman did exactly what he's supposed to.
That's a different question, and nobody's taking that position
but
yet.
You're asking two different questions, right? When you ask about communities like Chicago and Baltimore that are in absolute crisis,
how about Detroit?
Well, crisis
Cleveland,
now.
Ohio.
Crisis right
Democratic.
You have to do triage care before you can start talking about health. And right now, violence is rampant. people who maybe were being harassed at once have now turned to violence, which is unacceptable. So now
worse.
is not the time to start talking about community nutrition when it comes to policy in those areas. They have to get a hold of this violent problem. I read an article yesterday about Ferguson.
How do you get a hold?
And businesses are running out of Ferguson.
I want to know how you get a hold of a violent problem.
Well, I mean,
how do you get a hold of a violent problem? Let's talk. Let's
well, you
not
don't.
talk
You
about
don't
it.
do
Let's
it. Well, you don't do it with velvet gloves. What do you propose?
There you
Steve?
go. You don't do it with velvet gloves.
That's what I'm saying. They
Let
have
the
to.
police do their work.
They have to get control of the situation in Ferguson.
There are thugs living in these neighborhoods, and they can't even go in there and help clean it up. And now I know Franklin's getting all upset on me when I
No,
said
I'm not
thugs.
getting all upset. What I know
When you
is
go
that
into some of these neighborhoods, there's total violent crime.
What I know is you're looking at what's happened in response to one of these issues that arose, but the facts are violent crime is down all over America for the last 20 years, dramatically. That's a fact.
Well, what's wrong with Detroit, and what's wrong with
So we've
these other cities?
proven for 20 years that we can reduce violent crime, but these cities tend to be the exception,
Yeah.
and are showing spikes.
No,
but we've proven that that the trend of society is becoming less violent. Yet we have these hot spots.
You have these democratic
that are
cities
becoming
that
more
have
violent.
problems. That's what it is. Let's tell it like it is. Is Baltimore? How long has it been run democratically?
I don't.
Do you
know
think the
answer to
mayor?
that
Do
one.
you think the mayor in
I
Baltimore?
know that
made-
40% of the city council there is Republican, and if one more
no, wait a minute.
flips, it'll become a
Well,
Republican.
let's look at it. One of
That's
the
the
biggest,
fact.
and
What's
Frank,
that got to do with it, though?
Well,
Franklin-
I'm saying this.
Oh, are you?
Ben,
Are you?
do you
Wait
think
a
that
minute.
ma-
Wait a
do you
minute.
think that
Wait a
mayor?
minute.
Do
Wait
you
a minute.
think that mayor?
Are you
not bringing in
telling
any
me?
police-
Are
not
you
letting the police department go in?
Are you
think
telling
that
me?
was a good
Are you
decision?
telling me right now
Let's
that
burn
you
the
think
place
police
down.
departments have been too liberal over the years?
When
Is
you
that what
sit
you're
there
saying?
and say, "Look, go ahead and burn it down," do you think that's not liberal?
That's not
well,
what she
let's
said.
go back
No,
to
wait a minute. What did she do?
First of all,
What did she do?
First of all, I'm not standing up for her, but I will say, you don't know anybody who's ever stood in those shoes yet, trying to figure out what to do in that circumstance, and there's no guidebook for that.
Well, let's look
I
at a
think there
liberal.
is.
One of the liberal arguments
I think
over
there is a guidebook.
one of the liberal arguments
You
over
go
why
in and
cities
you stop it.
Never mind.
No, you go in and stop it. When there's problems, when people are
Okay.
looting
Okay.
and rioting and setting buildings on fire, you just sit there and watch them.
Steve, one of the liberal arguments for why people resort to violent crime or criminal behavior in general is lack of economic opportunity. Am I correct, Franklin? That they
Education
don't
ain't
have
got
the
anything to do
ability.
with it.
Well, no,
They've
lack
all-
of
they've all
opportunity.
had-
What I'm saying
they've
is,
all had a chance.
when you look at Detroit, Baltimore, Chicago, and these key areas where the liberal management policy at the local level has pinched off business growth, small business growth, opportunities in those areas, is it safe to say that that could be contributing to the problem?
Wait a minute.
I think lack of economic opportunity is clearly a factor.
Tell me what
Sure.
you mean by that.
And
me
you
what
wouldn't
you
say
mean.
the high
No,
taxation.
I want to answer. What do you mean by that?
Well, you've got neighborhoods in Baltimore, for example, that have been in a state of blight for 50 years. It's
Okay.
never changed. You've got neighborhoods there where the unemployment rate is something like 52%.
How much money do we have to put in a system to make it better?
Well, the question is, when you're in a city like that, if you're putting hundreds of millions of dollars into one part of the city and you're putting nothing into others, whether or not that's an appropriate choice to make.
Well,
that's
who's
the question.
doing that?
Franklin,
Once
let me-
again, liberal administrations
No,
are
Franklin,
doing that.
Let me say something. Now, you grew up in the poor side of town. Am I right or wrong?
You're absolutely right.
All right. You decided you didn't want to live that way, didn't you?
That's correct.
You did something about it, didn't you?
Me, and I got a lot of help along the way.
Well, okay. Is there not
And a lot
help?
of that help came from the government, by the
Well,
way.
is there not government help available for people now?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Tell me how you'd say no.
Well, I
If
didn't
you got a
grow, I didn't
criminal
grow, I
record?
didn't grow up in a place where the unemployment rate was 50%. I mean, where is it you're supposed to go to work?
Well,
where?
You know what?
You think all those people would
I grew
prefer
up
not to work?
when I grew
don't
up,
believe that.
my dad died when I was young.
Mhm.
I'm telling you, I remember working from the time I could start reading and writing. I
Sure.
remember working.
Sure.
But you know what? I didn't stay at home. I didn't get in gangs. I didn't, there probably wasn't gangs back then. I remember one time when I laid out of school one day. I laid out of school one day and thought I'd try to hang out with a couple of buddies of mine,
Mm-hmm.
and my poor little mother she found me.
Uh-huh.
Now I'll tell you, somebody I was proud of was that mother in that Ferguson or Baltimore, wherever it was, that saw her child on the TV camera and came down and started beating the crap out of him.
Well,
That boy's going to always remember that mama. She did a good job. She went and got him, and she may have saved that boy's life right there, that one time. But you know,
Well,
the
no
problem
one's
we've got in our society today is lack of parenting. If they are having these children and they're not going to be parents, something's wrong there. And that's where I think our problem is. Most of these kids these days don't have a parent. Back when I grew up, you know, I had a parent that died, but then I had a mother. But I had a good mother. But the parents are the problems with these kids. And the problem in these ghettos and stuff like this is they're just breeding them. They're baby mamas. That's what they call them, baby mamas. And they get them on the society to go over here and draw and get some more funding by having more babies. And that's how they live. That's how they take care of it. It's a bad society when you don't have a mom and a daddy. We need to get our mamas and our daddies. All these black leaders that are stirring up this stuff, if they would get after these daddies for producing these children and not becoming a parent, then I think we'd be a much better society. That's, you know, I hate to go off.
Sterilization program? What was the?
You know what? I don't know. Cut them off. Don't let them have money for having babies. Don't pay them to have babies. If they have a baby, I'm sorry. They should have thought about that.
Well, I just go back to the very real policy issues that government has control over. A government can't put a mom and dad in a home. It can quit rewarding behavior contrary to that, but the very real issues of the difficulty seen in Detroit with small business environment, with taxation, and having come from a family as well where my father and mother were from poverty, the opportunities they afforded came through the ability to self-advance because government wasn't in the way. Mm-hmm. Now, in North Carolina, that's changed. Government's in the way now. But I look at these cities and I see the common denominator of the fact that, once again, you know, Franklin, you mentioned over the past 20, 50 years, there are still these communities of blight in each of these, but they've been under liberal administrations, the people who champion not having those communities, fighting poverty, yet they still exist. What's wrong? What's wrong with those factors that they continue to deal with?
And Jesse Jackson, all they are cheerleaders to stir this stuff up. If they would get more involved in the problems, you know, they're supposed to be preachers. Well, I don't think they're doing a good job of preaching.
What I'm going to say to you guys is that you want to mix up issues that are separate and try to link them. If you think there's not a problem...
Oh, I didn't link them. Al Sharpton linked them when he said the reason these communities result to violence is because they're impoverished.
If you think there's not a problem
Jesse Jackson
with the policing tactics that are being used in some of these areas, you've just got your head stuck in the sand.
Now, let me say something.
And let me tell you something. If it was your kid out here who was getting pulled over and arrested for nothing 3 and 4 and 5 times a year, you'd have the same view about it.
But the police departments are managed at the policy level by liberal administrations.
If it was my kid that was getting arrested, I'd keep him a little closer to home. That's what I'd do as a parent.
In a city, that is your home. It's your neighborhood.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Franklin.
If 65% of the arrests the police make turn out not to be a crime, you don't think that's a problem?
Well, I think if you go into these situations and everybody's yelling at you, screaming or fixing to shoot at you, and somebody's giving you a bunch of lip, and you arrest them for something to shut them up and get them off the street, maybe they help the situation that moment.
I can only say that you clearly have not walked through these neighborhoods and seen what I'm talking about. Because this is absurd. There is no justification for a police department working that way. They've got big crimes to work on, and that's where they ought to focus their efforts, not harassing citizens.
Then what do you think that mayor should have done in Baltimore?
In which instance?
Well, when the
Well,
rioting started.
I think with the benefit of hindsight, she should have brought more police in at that point.
Well, she wouldn't let them go in. They were there.
She had just
she wouldn't let them stop
watched the Ferguson episode, who they brought people in, and that didn't calm her down.
We got a call. Let's take a call. Go ahead, caller. You're live.
The big problem with all of that you guys are talking about, been on the police force, stayed on the police force for 15 years.
All right.
Your hands are tied.
Velvet handcuffs.
Well, you can't do your job, I'll put it that way. And the people that were there causing the majority of the disturbances were brought in to these communities, and the local people there are getting the blame for this. You know, that I'm sure that there are local people that are involved in this thing, but they're the people that were causing all the looting and the burning and the rock throwing and all this other stuff. They were brought in there, and they were brought into Baltimore, and they were brought into Chicago. And you know, I agree with you, Steve, that Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton ought to be held accountable for what they do in stirring this crap up.
All they are is cheerleaders.
And you're right. Those arrest reports show a statistically higher percentage of the arrests that are coming out of these riots are from people who are not local. They're out of town. They're out of area.
Well, they stir things up. It's like that. I have to go back to that boy that mama saw on television. He was down there being part of the deal. And then when she saw him, she went down. I was so proud. That was such a proud moment for that mama. And, you know, I think more ought to be done for her. She's the one that needs the help. She might be living in a poor section, and she might be having hard problems. But you know one thing? She's a pretty good mama. And that's what we need to try to get behind.
Well,
Let's get behind the good parents and try to make
people
that are going to help.
That day, that kid did not go to jail.
That's right. That day, that kid did not go to jail. And I promise you,
he may have gotten punished.
I bet you that mama saved that kid's life that day, because that kid was headed in the wrong direction. Anyway, I guess that's about it. We didn't get a whole lot of topics covered today, but we got a few. I appreciate Nicholas, you coming on.
My pleasure.
I want you to bring your new superintendent, and let's bring her on here and get to know her a little bit.
We'll try and do that.
Adam, thank you for coming in this morning.
Anytime.
How's things going?
Going pretty good.
All right. Franklin, as usual, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week. Bye-bye now.
You've been listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson, John Stanberry, and Franklin Chansey. Catch them again on Whoop FM at noon today and every Wednesday morning from 7:30 to 8:30. Now, back to more music on Whoop FM.
While we're making the takes, Bob, we won't be able to have that camera going.